Are you ready?
Let's go.
Now circling in the neutral zone.
Here's the pitch on the way. 36 yards for the win.
This.
Here comes a big chance. The shot.
Is
this the dagger?
The neutral zone.
Home run.
This is as good as it gets.
The Neutral Zone is brought to you by the Ontario Para Network. Follow them online at onpara.ca.
Now, here's your host, two-time Paralympian, Brock Richardson.
What's going on? It's time for another edition of The Neutral Zone. I am indeed your host, Brock Richardson. Coming up on today's show, we release another Canadian Paralympic Summit interview. This time we speak with Priscilla Gagné, who is a para-judo athlete. And with the pressure of the Paralympics upcoming, we talk about what that's like filtered down to other competitions. I'm joined by Josh Watson and Cam Jenkins. Here comes your headlines.
Neutral Zone headlines.
New York Yankees outfielder Aaron Judge made history, becoming the fastest player to 300 home runs and surpassing the great Babe Ruth by more than 300 plate appearances. Congratulations, Aaron Judge. It's always interesting to see what this guy is going to do, and he still has quite a career ahead of him.
Austin Matthews becomes the next captain for the Toronto Maple Leafs. This is a obvious development, I would suggest, but it comes with some eyebrow raising as well, which we'll discuss a bit later on in the program. But congratulations to Austin Matthews.
Save the date. Ontario Para Network is in collaboration with Friday Village and Parasport Ontario, and they'll be hosting a 2024 Paralympic Games watch party. Join us on Saturday, September 7th at Friday Village for an exciting day of cheering on our incredible Paralympic athletes. Please follow the Para Network on all social media platforms for more details.
Those are your headlines. If you want to get a hold of us on social media, here's how you can do that.
And welcome back to the Neutral Zone broadcast booth.
Play ball!
We're set to get this ball game underway. The first pitch is brought to you by Brock Richardson's X account at Neutral Zone BR. First pitch and a strike. Hey gang, why not strike up a chat with Claire Buchanan from the Neutral Zone? Find her on X at Neutral Zone CB. There's a swing of the chopper out to second base, right at Claire as she picks up the ball, throws it over to the first base for a routine play.
Out!
And fans, there's nothing routine about connecting with Cam and Josh from the Neutral Zone at Neutral Zone Cam J and at J Watson 200. And the Neutral Zone is brought to you by the Ontario Para Network. Connect with them at ON Para Network. Follow them online at onpara.ca. Now that's a winning combination.
As mentioned, it's time to release another one of our Paralympic Summit interviews. Please enjoy this week's interview.
My name is Priscilla Gagné. I do judo and I live in Montreal.
Why judo for you?
I used to wrestle, but they don't have wrestling in the Paralympics, so I decided to start judo. I could have stuck with goalball, but I really missed the combativeness of wrestling, and judo has some extra special elements like strangulations and arm locks that I found extremely appealing.
So how do you know you have a talent of wrestling and judo? Like, is this I'm wrestling my siblings, I'm wrestling how do we figure out that there's a talent like this?
Well, for me personally, I loved roughhousing with my brother and my mom's boyfriend's son. So the three of us would do tag team wrestling, would wrestle one another and try to high five the other one or touch the other one, and then the other one would jump in our place. So we did that for a long time. And then my older cousin was in high school and told me he was a wrestler. He was really good. So I thought, wow, I can't wait to get to high school so I can wrestle. And I knew girls were allowed. So then when I went to W. Ross Macdonald School for the Blind and Visually Impaired for 9th and 10th grade, which is where I was finally introduced to wrestling. I made sure to ask about that immediately, and just had a raw talent for it, I guess, and not pretty. My gift is not beautiful judo or beautiful wrestling. It's not graceful by any means. If you want a beautiful, pretty demonstration of classical judo, do not come to me. Mine is more gritty and determination and make you eat the mat and just do whatever it takes to win. So that's it.
So what classifies as pretty judo? Like, you just told me what yours is, but what would you say is pretty judo?
Pretty judo is people that have really beautiful techniques that are just so soft on their feet, and it looks completely effortless. They just catch you, and foot sweeps and beautiful positioning, and they do all these big, beautiful throws that look so effortless. For me, it's like I'm crushing you down and I'm scrunching you up and I'm just doing whatever I can to knock you over. So I do the same techniques, but more raw competitive as opposed to classical Japanese.
This is probably a terrible placement for this question, given that you moved on from it, but I'm curious, was there anything broken in your household from wrestling with your brothers or anything like that?
We had some things just from being kids, playing in the house and doing stupid stuff. We knocked over the love seat quite a few times. Actually, we had a game we just run into the love seat and knock it over. It was really fun. But nothing ever really got damaged, I don't think, because we had quite a large basement area with not a lot of furniture. So we didn't really make too much of a mess.
I love that. When I was putting this together, I learned that you had an ankle injury, and then 2 weeks later you went to an event and won the silver medal. Can you tell me about that?
Sure. In judo and any combat sport, pretty much any sport, injuries are common. They're going to happen. It's just part of the nature of the game. People get injured without doing sport, so you just we tape it up. We do what we need to do to protect it, preserve it, and we just keep going. If I needed to stop, we seek advice from physios and stuff. If I need to stop, we stop. If I need to rest it, we rest it. But when we get the clearance to go, you just keep going, and you find other ways to do what you need to do without further hurting it or putting too much stress on it. So I don't even think about my ankle or anything like that when I'm competing. I don't feel it. The adrenaline kicks in and you don't feel anything really.
So there was just full on green light with the ankle, just go for it and.
Yep, it was green light. We tape it to be safe because you don't want further injury you don't want pain. So we just tape it to be safe, which just basically, if you picture a wrap, if you go to the hospital for a sprained ankle, they give you kind of like an ankle wrap. Tape does a similar thing. It's just stronger, but you can't leave it on long term. So it's really just for training and for competition. So you just prevent it from moving in certain directions, kind of thing.
So there was never a question of I shouldn't go to this event.
No, it was such a minor thing that was never a concern.
So when you think of the Paralympic Games, you've been to a few. What keeps you going to the Paralympic Games?
I think each Games has a different motivation. I think they each have their own drive. So for Rio, it was just a lifelong dream of mine to go to the Games, and it was exciting to go in judo. And so that was that. For Tokyo, I didn't get a medal in Rio. I just missed the podium. I took 5th place. I lost my bronze medal match. And so I was so close I could taste it almost, So I decided to continue because I wanted to get that medal. So then when I got the medal in Tokyo, I came back. It took me many months to decide whether I wanted to continue on to Paris. And ultimately I had 2 decision factors that really played a huge influence, that made a big impact on my decision. One was, with the COVID restrictions, training up until COVID was not pleasant. And I didn't want to leave my sport on that note. I wanted to come back and make my peace with it and just have a great finish to my career as far as training goes. Secondly, and probably more importantly, they decided to change the vision classifications. So when you're legally blind or blind, there's all different levels of vision. And to ask somebody who's just barely legally blind to fight someone who's fully blind, it's just not fair. So they did that for years, and they finally decided to change that. So now they have blind people fighting blind people. So you got J1, that's blind, and J2, which is low vision. So now the J2s fight the J2s, the J1s fight the J1s, and I really wanted to experience what that would be like because I'd never really fought another blind person. So I really wanted to see what that would feel like, and that was the bigger deciding factor of me continuing.
How much of an advantage is somebody with low vision versus blind totally?
It's a huge advantage if you have vision because you can do hand and eye coordination, you can see foot sweeps, you can see where to go in for the openings for the attacks, you can strategize, you can use the out of bounds line against the person because you can see that it's coming, so you can push them that way and force them to make a move, as opposed to if you're fully blind, you're just worried about judo. You don't care about tactics like trying to push you out of bounds or that kind of thing. You don't have the hand and eye coordination. And that aside, learning judo is totally different when you can see what you need to do compared to if you were to close your eyes. Right now, the listeners of this podcast, if I were to tell you, okay, today we're going to do uchimata, so we're going to make sure that we have a proper grip here on the lapel and here on the sleeve. We're going to put our center of gravity right here and our foot right back here. Now, your lifting support leg needs to be like this with your toes pointed in that direction. The people listening right now are like, I have no idea what she's talking about. And that's how it is for me when I'm learning anything in judo. I don't know I imagine what they're saying, but I don't know where this direction is. I don't know where this lapel and that sleeve, or where on the lapel or where on the sleeve. So those little things make a huge difference because now I gotta have somebody come and explain it all to me, so it takes 10 times longer. And depending on if the person's able to properly describe it, makes a big difference too. So, and then you don't have the visual aspect of the proper posture. So the things that are not said out loud that you just perceive and take in are things like posture, body stance, foot patterns, the unconscious things that you see. So we don't have that gift. We don't have that ability. So that's where the unfairness really kicks in.
My understanding is that one of your games, you were the flag bearer. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, so Tokyo 2021, I had the great honor and privilege of being Canada's flag bearer for the opening ceremonies. And it was just a great honor to be there representing all of my fellow Paralympians because I felt like I was representing more than just Canada. I felt like I was truly representing my population, which is Paralympians, people living with disabilities in Canada, and that we made it there together. And so it was walking on behalf of them. You know, the Canadian delegation was not allowed to be there. So it was just basically 6 of us, including security, a doctor, my guide, the chef de mission. So it was really restricted. So it was extremely a big honor. I can't even say enough words to describe how honored it was to be asked to do it, and just walking with them in my heart, imagining them jump and scream and shout and wave, all the energy that they would have if there was 200 athletes behind me. I just imagined that and just lived it in my heart, in my mind, and pictured them so that I feel like they did walk with me, even if they had to watch from a big screen back in the village.
You can dream this up, you can think about it, you can do all those things prior to the opening ceremonies under that extreme circumstance. What was the one thing that you didn't necessarily expect that happened once you did it, after you did all the dreaming, all the feels, everything like that?
Of the opening ceremony specifically?
Yeah.
What was really cool, so there's quite the time change between Tokyo, obviously, and Ontario, let's say. And my family, they were awake, which is shocking. My parents were both together, they're divorced, so they came together at my grandmother's house. So all 3 of them are at my grandma's house watching TV, watching the opening ceremonies. And so I called them from WhatsApp. I WhatsApp videoed my dad from the tunnel. And so they got to experience it with me, which was super cool. Right up until the point where you could see me on TV, then I had to put the phone away because that's just rude. But that was really special. And my grandma was just bawling. I think they all 3 were just bawling. They were so proud. And it just was so cool that I could share with them what it looked like to be in the tunnel. Like they got to see the behind the scenes and all of that. So that was really cool.
Is there a difference, and again, I'm asking you to use your mind in this question, but is there a difference, you think, in being the flag bearer for the opening ceremony versus the closing, because the closing usually has a result of what you did at the event? Or do you think, hey man, I was the flag bearer either way, it didn't matter to me?
It doesn't matter. If you get chosen to be flag bearer, that's an honor. Opening and closing, both of them equally honorable. One is opening the ceremony up, and one is the closing the ceremony down, so they're equally important. Bookends are identical, in real life, and it's the same thing with opening and closing ceremonies. They're bookends. So yeah, I think it's 100% equal. It should be equal if it's not.
What's left for you to accomplish?
I want the gold. I came so close in Tokyo. I would love to be on the top of the podium. Absolutely. As we do this is nearing the end of the day here. Do you feel like you accomplished whatever it was that you set out to do? And maybe you could tell us what it was that you set out to do here. Yeah, when I got invited to come to this, I remembered, I've done this a few times and had the great privilege of doing this several times. And I wanted to come up, wanted to make sure I had a real message from my heart for people. And the message, I didn't want to focus on anything negative. I didn't want to focus on, things from the past necessarily. I want to focus on positive things. And my message was really have fun and follow your heart, no matter what the struggles are, no matter how impossible it looks, if the odds are stacked against you. Go for it, try it. You're never too anything. You're never too old, you're never too young. It's never too late, it's never too soon. If you want to try something, go try it. Go have fun, live with no regrets. And I really hope that came across. Awesome. Thank you so much for doing this interview. We greatly appreciate it. And best of luck heading to Paris. Thanks so much for doing this.
The Neutral Zone is sponsored by the Ontario Para Network. Their focus on the growth and development of wheelchair basketball, tennis, and rugby in Ontario.
So I recently attended the 2024 Ontario Provincial Championships, and this was on our docket for last week, but we of course didn't have time to get to it because when you put three of us in a room who have passion about sports, sometimes we just don't get to everything on our sheet. So I thought I'd put this on today. It's always interesting because when you promote events of any kind, you always usually feature one athlete, a couple of athletes, what have you. And in this case, for the provincial championships for bocce, they focused on one athlete, and that was Lance Kreiderman. And the reason this is because he is Ontario's only representative for the Paralympic Games. And so I had some experience of this when I was about 12 years old. In 2008, when I was 18 going to the Paralympic Games, I had some experience with this, and I was on the front of their magazine and very big picture, very lots of press release and all that kind of stuff, and photo shoot and things like that. So I was at these games, and I got to commentate one of Lance's games, and he really kind of struggled a little bit. He won the event, which is great and wonderful, but I got to speak with his personal coach after the game that I commentated, and I said, anything weird going on with Lance? And he said, yeah, I think he's feeling a bit of the pressure with the Paralympic Games around the corner, but not only that, feeling as though because he's at the provincial championships and he feels he should be winning this event, he just feels a bit of struggles with that. So I'm curious from you guys, what is it like to feel struggles at events, but then you're expected to do something at an event and the pressure that goes along with that? Start with Cameron.
Yeah, I can relate it from a sludge hockey or para ice hockey standpoint. Being the goalie way back in the day, I always felt super pressure because if I let a goal in, I felt like I was letting my team down. And, to me, that was unacceptable. For league games, regular games, I put a lot of pressure on myself, and I think that hindered me sometimes. especially sometimes what happened is once they scored a goal, I was able to calm down and say, okay, they scored one goal and I was concerned about that, so I'm not going to worry anymore. But some of my best performances, were when the playoffs were or when we were playing in a tournament. Those were some of the best games I've ever had, especially in Huntsville, where I still had that worry of failing. However, for some reason, I was able to rise to the occasion for tournament games. So, but yeah, I always felt pressure that I was letting the team down when I let in the goals. But as someone once said to me, if they score a goal, they also got through 5 other people in order for them to score that goal. So I tried to look at it from that perspective. I don't think I ever mastered that, though, because I still felt bad or I worried once I let in a goal myself.
Yeah, I think that's a great example of the kind of pressure we can put on ourselves, because I've also been a sledge hockey goaltender, a para-ice hockey goaltender, and I can completely relate to that. You get into a game and you're watching your team and you just notice things about your team and you just say to yourself, oh boy, the guys are not on it today, which means that if I let anything in, we're going to have a world of problems. And you end up hyping the pressure on yourself, and just it can absolutely snowball. And you get one goal, leads to another, leads to somebody getting upset, and then they don't do their thing correctly, and then somebody comes and scores another goal, and before you know it, it's just a mess. I have had other instances where I've just felt really good on a particular day and been like, I'm going to stop everybody, and been able to do it. Brock's, I think, been to one of those games, and I'm sure we've talked about that on previous episodes, where we get into a shootout and it's like, okay, it's me against you, and you're not going to beat me today. And that works great, as long as your facade is not chipped, as long as your armor is not breached. The minute your armor is breached, well, that's the end of that. So it's very tough. It's a lot of pressure to put on yourself. And I mean, I haven't been to a level that Lance has been to, where or Brock has been to, where you're making Paralympic Games, but I can appreciate the kind of pressure. And even in talking to Brianna Hennessy last week or the week before, can't remember what week she was on now. Sorry, Brianna. But in trying to find a time to sit down with her, she's off to Paralympics as well, and she's dealing with the pressure of this person needs her to do an ad, and this person needs her to do an interview, and that person needs her to do an interview. And it's a lot on your plate, and it's a lot to deal with. And
then they say, after all that, they say, oh, by the way,
yeah, no pressure
don't
there.
Compete at the Paralympic Games. Like what you're referring to, Josh, is the outside stuff, and then all of a sudden it's like, okay, get in a canoe, kayak, a bocce box, whatever,
at your best level,
and compete at a high level. And those are the hardest things to do. I mean, I can remember when I was 18 and thought it was cool. I'm on the cover of the Parasport magazine for the Parasport Games, because that's what they tied our provincials into, and I was the one that they were focusing on and doing all this for. And then I remember getting to the first game, and I remember sitting there thinking to myself, oh, I have to win this event. And no one told me that I had to win the event, of course, but it's that moment of like, oh, but I'm on the front of this magazine as a, first-time Paralympian, 18 years old, XYZ, and these are people who, I mean this with all due respect, but these are people who are supposedly below my level because I made the national program. I'm going to the Paralympic Games, so I have to do this. And that's what I saw with Lance. It was like, wait, but I have to do this. And I will also say that the media doesn't help, because what they wanted us to do one of the games when he came onto the court was mention the fact that he's Ontario's only representative going to the game. So that alone, right before the game, you're putting it out over a loudspeaker, at the Kingston Frontenac's building. And it's like, we did that. And I thought it was cool, and I still think it's cool that you need to do that. But then I step back and I think,
turn the screw.
I just added that pressure unintentionally just by announcing it over the top. So you can do the simplest things, Cameron, and you can do that with no intention of doing anything bad, but it can result in something so big.
Yeah, like imagine if he ended up being last in that competition, but he's still going to the Paralympics. Maybe some people would look at him differently if that was the case, but it didn't happen. He ended up getting first, and it really is, it goes back to mental health and to be mentally strong, however you want to phrase it. That's what it comes back to. You have to push those things out of your thought process and try to have reaffirming positive thoughts that you are going to do well, that this is a competition to warm up for the Paralympics. So if I don't end up in first, that's okay. Maybe I want to work on, throwing the ball or putting it in a certain spot every time, because I'm not too good at that. So I want to practice that before I go to the Paralympics. So, whatever your, strong points are, reaffirm those. But any of your weaknesses, you probably want to, practice that just before you go to the Paralympics, so you can become more confident in it. So when you actually get to the Paralympics, hopefully it's a snowball of positive affirmations that you're going to do well.
I think it's probably also fair to say that you kind of have to compartmentalize yourself to a degree. So you kind of say, okay, yes, I have all of these things going on and all this pressure, but I'm going to set that aside, and now I'm just going to focus on this for the time being. It's not easy to do at all. And as you say, Cameron, you do have to be quite mentally strong in order to do that. But I do think that's a big part of it. And I think the people that succeed at it the most are the ones that can sort of put that in a box and say, yes, I'm nervous. Yes, I'm feeling the pressure, but I'm going to put the pressure over here right now. And I'm just going to focus on doing what I'm doing in this moment.
And you can also look at it and put each event in its own little compartment and move on from that, and not put it as, well, because this happened in this event, this is going to happen in that event. And I'll give you an example. We watched the wheelchair basketball program, the men's program, participate in the Four Nations Cup, and most of their games they lost by double digits and close to 20 points. There was a lot of stuff that didn't go right for this team. And again, this was an event that's supposed to be a tune-up, and that's the goal. And they're going to spout out the fact that the results don't matter, and it's all about the preparation. But when you see things on social media that say in the final win against Korea, when they say it's about time and finally a win, that can go other places in the mind where you don't necessarily want to. Do I have concern about the wheelchair basketball program? Yes, because they were doing things that I just go, how do we fall off the gas pedal in the second half of games when we're leading in the first half and then we just peter away? That's concerning. But I think overall, what's more concerning is the people around that suggest it's about time we get a win. Do you guys have concern about the wheelchair basketball team in the sense of we lose 3 out of our first 4 games in this event that's meant as a tune-up, Josh?
I don't, and it's funny. I had a chance to listen to a hit you did on Now with Dave Brown this morning, and so I know you stole one of my lines, sir. And I don't worry about it because I view that as a tune-up. And so for me, a tune-up is a practice. And as I've said on this program before, and as you so eloquently stole, if I have a bad,
But I didn't give you credit. He shared it.
That fair. All right. I will back off, but I appreciate the shout out. What I had said was that if I had a bad practice right before a nationals in track and field, let's say, I felt a lot more confident going into nationals because I felt like I had all the oopses out of me. I had all I had worked out all the kinks, so to speak. And then I could go into my event and go, okay, I've already had all the yips and everything. Those are done. Now it's time to perform. And I was able to do it. But I've never had the pressure of a Paralympic Games. So I would imagine that's a little different.
Yeah, but you can only go with what you know, though, right? So,
absolutely.
For you, maybe that was the Paralympic Games. Some people might have a bad practice the time before nationals, and then have your attitude where, okay, I got all the yips out, and here we go. I'm gonna, be good now. Where other people might have the yips the practice before and go, oh crap, what's going on? And they get in their head and then they don't perform well at nationals. So I think it really just depends on the person at the end of the day and how they mentally tick. And then, trying to get a performance coach or,
mental health coach or whatever the name of that type of coach is, to work with them to say, okay, well, you had the yips. Now that's come and gone. Just concentrate on the next one. And you use the word compartmentalize. Yes.
Hopefully I said that right.
You did. Very well.
Thank you. So they're going to need to do that for the next competition and forget. It's just like in hockey, and I keep going back to that because I played para-ice hockey.
Yep.
You let the last goal in, you got to forget about it, because if you put it in your mind, then you're going to just keep letting goals in. So,
that was something else I would do when I played hockey is there was a time where I would fill in for Cameron or for Brett Wills when we played together, and he would have a week off where maybe he was on vacation or something and they needed a goalie. So I would jump in having not played for a year. And I would just look at it and say, okay, start of the game, everything's good. Yeah, not going to allow any goals. Oh, I allowed a goal. Okay, not going to allow another goal. And I would just keep changing the goal. The goal was just no more goals. And if I knew we were playing a hard team, I would look at it and go, I'm just going to keep them to single digits. I don't care if that single digit is 9. I'm just going to keep them to single digits.
Yeah.
And you set yourself up with whatever kind of goal you can, because at some point, especially in that instance, I'm like, I haven't played this position in a year. I don't know what I'm doing. Like, I'm basically cannon fodder here. Like, just let's get this hour over with, please.
2 things here. But the first part of this is, a lot of what you hear from coaches in this tune-up scenario and it happens in all sports, okay? There's all sports that do tune-up events before a big event, and it doesn't even necessarily have to be a Paralympic Games. It could be a national championships, whatever it is. Do you guys buy in team sports when you hear from the coaches, it's not about the results, we're working on a process? Because I struggle with that now, being in the member of the media. I loved it. As an athlete, I loved it because I used to be able to go to the media and be like, yeah, I'm just working on the process. And then I'd walk away from the mic and go, that's what I'm going to do. But now as a member of the media, I'm like,
it's such a load of crap.
Do I buy that? It's such a load of crap. I agree with you, Josh. So Cameron, is it a load of crap or is there something to it?
I think maybe it's a little bit from column A and a little bit from column B. I do think that for, pre-games, training, games that mean nothing, maybe some tune-ups before you go to a big game. Yeah, I think that they do try to work on some things. I'm sure they don't necessarily have the, the number one players out there. Maybe they get the, 1B players out there to get some more ice time and do some things. So that would obviously, impact what the score is going to be. But yeah, sometimes people just have a bad game, and it's, it's just a bad game on their part. And yeah, they just need to take ownership and say, yeah, I just had a bad game. And, that's one in my last 10 games or however many games. And I'm not too worried about it. It's on to the next game. But, like everyone wants to look good in all parts of life. You go on Facebook, go on any social media, you're only going to see the positives. You're not going to see too many people put, what they need to work on or their negatives. And it's the same thing with sports. They're going to end up saying, oh, well, I'm just working on things, and it's the process. You got to follow the process. And I think that's one of the most words in sports these days is the process.
Well, everything about sports media is cliches. It doesn't matter what the sport is. But I'm
doing 110% effort here.
Exactly.
That's not even possible. Like that's the thing that
that's when you roll your eyes. Like, yeah, okay, bud. How about you go sit down and have another donut? But in all seriousness, it can be a cop out, but at the same because everybody wants to win. Let's be honest. Nobody wants to sit there and say, I don't care if I win today. I just want to work on my strategy. Bull. You want to win. We all do. Having said that, I can see in a sport that requires a lot of strategy or a lot of game planning where you might enter a tournament that's, say, Cambridge Memorial something or other tournament. It doesn't mean anything in the grand scheme of things. So you go out there and you say, okay, if we're playing hockey, okay, guys, we're going to, every chance we get, we're going to work on our power play. That's the thing I want us to get really good at this tournament before we go to the even bigger tournament in 3 weeks. But if you're not preparing for a big tournament like a Paralympics, then no, it's a load of crap. It all depends on the scenario. And a lot of times when you hear someone say, oh, I'm focusing on my craft, or I'm focusing on the process, as you both eloquently put it, usually you only hear that when someone has been absolute garbage on a particular day. And so it's no wonder that you're sitting there going, well, if that's working on your process, you need to work on it a lot more, because that was terrible.
I would just like the listeners to know that if I make any mistakes today, it's only because I'm working on my process.
There you go.
I've been working on the process of being a host for almost 10 years, so enjoy my process. It's it is what it is. The second part to this, and I'm very curious to hear what both of you have to say. It was asked of me by a person who, let's just say, isn't entirely the most sports well-rounded individual in my life, but they asked me, they said, isn't this too close to a Paralympic Games? Do you have fears of them burning out? And this was during a game I was watching of the men's basketball program, and they were playing god awful. And then the question was posed to me, isn't this too close? Your reaction to this, Cameron, is what?
No, I don't think it's too close. I think it's a great time. Maybe for certain sports it might be, but for other sports, I don't think so. I think it's a great time to get a tune-up going and to, get the feel of your implements, instruments, whatever you want to call them, to be able to kind of know what it's like, just to get the feel of everything just before you go away to the Paralympics. Because, the Paralympics, it's a whole different beast. It's stress level 110% when you get there, and you're doing it for your country. You're doing it for your family. So I think it's a good idea to, get out there and to do it just before the games.
Yeah, I think it really depends on the sport. In a sport like basketball, I can see it being beneficial because for a couple of reasons. Number one, if you're able to have your team together, then it's just that repetition of being in a high level competition. And so you develop that muscle memory. The other reason I can see it being important in a sport like wheelchair basketball is that if you aren't able to have the team together for a long period of time for, say, a pre-Paralympic training camp, then this tournament might be a good way to bring the guys back together and to work on that chemistry that you're going to need when you go into the bigger tournament.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of a sport that I wouldn't want to, and I'm thinking wheelchair rugby, aka murder ball. I don't know if that one would be a good one to have a tune-up before the Paralympics, because they're bash one another, and I don't know like what the injury report is for people that play that sport, but it looks vicious. And I've seen it live. It looks vicious, and it wouldn't surprise me if they have some injuries after they play a game there. So if I had to pick one, that would be top of my list, where you wouldn't want to have one before the or too close to before the Paralympic Games.
Well, and I'll just piggyback off that, Cameron. I think the time you don't want to have something too close to the Paralympics is if you have a type of disability where the sport taxes you quite a bit. Like I could see, and Brock, maybe you can speak to this better than Cameron or I, but I would think if you have CP and you wear down quicker, you may not want to have an event, or you may not want to have something that you have to travel to too close to the Paralympics because you don't want to wear your body out, so to speak.
Yeah, spasticity is a real thing in cerebral palsy and in other sports, and you can drain your body physically, but I would also suggest that you can drain it more mentally, because all of cerebral palsy affects your brain, and so the stamina becomes a real part of the conversation, and the more you push and the more you do, the less output you're going to be getting. But again, to go back to Brianna Hennessy talking to us about spoons and managing the amount of spoons you have per day, that's something that's real, of knowing your schedule a year in advance, 2 years in advance at times, and you need to know how much spoons you're willing to give on a certain day in order to bring yourself to the peak of where you need to go, because the excuse cannot be, oh, I have cerebral palsy and my brain just
I was too
won't
tired.
let me do this anymore, because the coaches are going to look at you and say, yeah, that's nice. You've known your schedule, so that's up to you to decide what you're doing. But yes, Josh, that is a fair point, in that your body and whatnot does have a certain limitation, especially when you consider cerebral palsy in the grand scheme of things as well. So yeah, it's interesting, the conversation there as well. One more piece here, and I'm trying to look it up on the fly, but I can't find who it is. But the men's head coach for the wheelchair basketball, he's headed into his third or fourth Paralympic Games, I think, and he's won gold medals, and how much pressure goes with him with being, part of this program for a bit of time, part of wheelchair basketball for a bit of time. I'm not exactly sure whether it's been 3 or 4 cycles with this program, but I know that he's been to other Paralympic Games with other countries as well. So there's that. How much pressure falls on him too? Or does he look at it, Cameron, and say, I already have my gold medal. I won a gold medal with Team Canada. I'm okay.
No, I don't think a coach would have that attitude whatsoever, because I'm sure he's very super competitive, and he wants to, get even more gold medals to add to his resume. So I don't think that that coach is going to be, I I don't think that it's not that he doesn't care. However, I think a coach's life does run out as it pertains to a team, especially if it's the same players. But with the Olympics, or Paralympics rather, is it always the same team? Is it always the same players that the last 3 or 4 Paralympics that he's been with this team with? Because if not, well, then if you're changing the players over, then, it's fresh and new and that's okay. But if it's the same players, I think a lot of the times coaches have a shelf life and they need a new coach to send a new message or a different message or just a different voice.
I think it depends on the success he's had with the team he's with. I agree with Cameron. Every coach, even if they've won a gold medal, you win one, you want to win another one. So I don't think the motivation to win is lacking. I think what might be the case is the pressure ramps up if you've had teams in the past that were supposed to succeed and did not. Then I think the pressure on the coach ramps up because the outside world looks at that team and goes, okay, coach, you've had the players. You haven't developed them. What's wrong with you?
And part of the scary part is you've proven you've won a gold medal with Team Canada. What happened? What changed? What went on? And of course, players age, players retire. I do think you're going to see a lot of players and athletes retire after these Paralympic Games. I look at some of this roster that exists in the Paralympics as a whole, and I'm going, there's about 6 or 7 athletes in various sports that I can look at and go, retiring soon. And so this is going to be a very veteran-laced team, a very competitive team, but this could be that moment where you're passing on the torch to that next generation, because I can look and if I sat and really looked at the team, I bet you I could come up with more than 6 or 7. But just off the top of my head, I'm thinking about 6 or 7 that I'm going, this is kind of the window. And windows are real, especially in a 4-year cycle, because it is such a long commitment to commit for 4 years, Josh.
Yes. And I mean, I think you have, if we continue talking about the wheelchair basketball and particularly the men's program, you have a guy like Patrick Anderson who was in the program, left the program, and came back to the program. But how much longer is he going to want to do this if he wants to do it again at all? And the thing to bear in mind with this team, when we talk about expectation, they didn't exactly get into the Paralympics through the front door, so to speak. They kind of slid backwards through the back door, if you will, and made it in through the repechage. And so what expectation do we really have for this team? Are they actually going to be good enough, or are they going to be as good as Patrick Anderson makes them? And if you're relying on one player to get the job done, that's not a recipe for success.
No, it's team sport.
And Patrick Anderson's 45 years old.
Yeah.
45.
My age.
You go to the next Paralympics.
You're 50.
Bro's pushing in almost 50.
Sorry, who's 50?
And I mean,
Patrick Anderson.
Patrick Anderson in 4 years.
Okay.
In 4 years, he would be 50.
So,
okay.
Like, this has got to be, like, I could be wrong, but this has got to be where you're looking going, I'm 45, 4 years, I'm getting close to 50, depending on when his birthday is. And, that's a tough conversation.
My gosh, that's
to
4
really
or
have
5 years away that he's going to be 50. Don't age him so quickly, for God's sakes.
No, but I'm saying to you that's why this is probably that Paralympic Games where he's looking going, do I really want to do this? Because even though I'm aging him, let's not forget the fact that athletes turn very quickly once their event is over to, okay, 4 more years. I am looking at myself in the mirror going, what do I, that mirror is coming very, very quickly for athletes very, very soon. I look at Arlie Rivard. She's in the pool. You often see athletes retire early in the pool because of the taxing physical situation. She was on with us a couple of months ago when I interviewed her, and she said she's looking into another, sport. There's a whole bunch of people on the on the Canadian wheelchair rugby team, Zach Mandel being one of them, and Travis Morrell being another one. All these people are looking, and trust me, that conversation in your head starts to creep ever so closer as the event gets longer and it gets towards the end. Right now, everyone is having the great conversation of, we're flying over to Paris, we're doing this. But your disability also plays a factor, especially when you are talking about the degenerative side of things. I look at Allison Levine, who's my age, who has muscular dystrophy. Well, what does your disability relate in 4 years? These are all conversations that para-athletes must have, that some Paralympians don't have. Or Olympians, pardon me.
No, and Paralympians, Olympians, they all have to look at themselves in the mirror and say, okay, is it time to retire? I think you made a great point before as far as there's a lot of people that are competing in these Paralympics that are up there in age, and I think that this is going to be their last competition. And the reason why I think that they trained for this one rather than retiring before is because they want to be at a games where there's actual, people in the stands, because the past, I don't know if it's 2 Olympics or I guess it was just the one where it was the COVID Olympics and nobody was in the stands. So I think a lot of people want to go out on a higher note with people in the stands. So I think that's why you're seeing some of these people compete in Paris 2024.
I also think the Winter Olympics, which was in 2022, also had some fan restriction as well. I don't think it was empty buildings, but it was certainly limited, and I think that's why you're thinking, Cameron, a couple of the Olympics, because I think the Winter Olympics, that 18 months after the 2021 games, was also a thing. And so you're right. I think that fans really mean something to people and really do mean what it means to them to have their family, their friends, etc. Go ahead, Josh.
Speaking on a much lower level than the Paralympics, but I'm sure all three of us know how much of a difference it can make to go, whether it's Cam and I out on the ice or you onto the bocce court, and have that crowd cheering. Like, that makes a huge difference. That can pump you up, sometimes too much, but it can absolutely play a factor. If you've got the crowd with you, it's amazing. If you've got the crowd against you, it can motivate you. So to be at a Paralympics and not have a crowd, I can't even imagine.
You know who the people who had the most advantage, in my opinion, with no crowd, and I mean this with all due respect, but the people that had the most advantage with no crowd was the bocce crowd, because they're not familiar with big crowds at bocce events. So for them were like, this is fine. I need it
I'm used to
be as quiet as I can. But most athletes, I would suggest that was a big deal.
The bocce crowd needs to
show me a basketball game that's quiet.
The bocce crowd needs to frickin' get more excited and to yell and scream and cheer and give me a B, give me an R, give me an O, give me a C, give me a K. What's that spell? Brock. They need to do that. It would just be more fun in the atmosphere. Would pump people up. Come on, bocce crowd. Next time you go to a bocce tournament, turn that volume up and turn your cheer meter up too.
The international level is very high. It's the national and regional events around the world that they just kind of go, who's coming in. It's funny because we were talking about the Ontario Bocce Championships, and I was with an intern doing the broadcasting, and she said, as we're looking around this 5,000 seat building. And she said on the Saturday, she said, "Oh, I hope that more spectators come." And I looked at her and I said, "Yeah, you keep thinking that." And it was the same people that came the very next day to watch. So it's just
friends and family
in sports, I think.
Good old friends and family.
Yeah. I don't think I'm gonna be fair if I bring up the Austin Matthews thing with only a couple of minutes remaining in the show. So I think we'll post the bigger conversation for next week. But just quick thoughts as we run out the door. What say both of you on just quick thoughts? Good, bad? What do we think?
Absolutely
Josh?
expected. I think people in the media have been going to Austin already. I have nothing against John Tavares as the captain, but I just feel as though he was too quiet a captain. And Austin has been the face of the franchise, so why not give him the C?
Yeah, Austin Matthews, he's the best player on the Leafs. A lot of the times your best player is the captain. He seems to be doing very well with the room and being a leader as it is. So I'm all for it.
I'm all for it. You guys left me a little bit of time, so I can be a little bit long and you can respond. But I'm all for this decision. I'll tell you what I'm not for. What I'm not for is stripping Tavares of the captaincy, making him sit up there in a press conference, reading off a sheet of paper about how, oh, I'm so behind this, whether he was or wasn't, it doesn't matter. Making the optics of this individual sit there and say, kumbaya, this and that, whether this is the right decision, wrong decision, how dare you, an organization, make your captain, who you basically just said, yeah, you had to see, and now we're going to take it away. I disagree with the optics. I understand the reason why it was done, but if we were going to get rid of it from John Tavares, then we should have had him move on, because to put that A on his sweater afterwards is a real shame as an athlete. And if he plays...
Absolutely not. You're way off base here, Brock. It's unbelievable you're so off base. Like, he only has 1 year left on his contract. He's not the same player that he was, although he's very useful. And wouldn't you want to have a useful player on your actual roster after his contract ends? He's probably going to have another contract with us, but you want to have Austin Matthews be the face of the franchise. Like, there's no easy way to do it, but it's what needed to be done. And the only reason why Tavares got it is because why John Tavares got the C is because Austin Matthews, was childish in his early years, and he ended up mooning some girl, and that caught in the press, and that's why he didn't get the C in the first place over John Tavares. So you're way off base on this one, buddy.
I agree with Brock that the optics were a little bit strange. Normally, with a hockey team, you do see the former captain traded away. In this case, I think the trade wouldn't have happened because of a no movement clause that Tavares would have in place. And I choose to believe what I saw, which from all sides that I viewed seemed to indicate that Tavares wanted this to happen. So if that's the case and he's ready to pass it on, then let him pass it on. It's a big responsibility. I mean, we saw what it did to Dion Phaneuf, who I loved when he was in Calgary and who ended up being nothing here in Toronto, unfortunately. It's a lot of extra pressure, and Austin has grown up, as Cam points out. He did make some mistakes as a young player. He's grown up now, and I think he's ready for the responsibility. And I look back to that end of the year when he and Nylander basically gave it to Marner on the bench for not pulling his weight. That's a captain's move right there. I didn't necessarily see Tavares doing that. I didn't see him taking somebody by the bootstraps, and maybe that's not his way. But there's only so much you can do as a show and don't talk
it's
kind of a captain.
like I said, and I want to end on this too. I'm not saying that the decision wasn't one that made sense. It was purely the optics that I didn't love. And ask Blake Wheeler and the Winnipeg Jets how that went over when Rick Bowness came in and said, we're stripping everybody of all the A's and all the C's and nobody's going to have that. That didn't go over well. And I'm not saying that that's what Craig Berube and the Toronto Maple Leafs are doing. They're giving Tavares an A, and that's fine. To me, I just look at this very simplistically. That's like somebody saying to me, we're giving you this promotion and then we're going to demote you, but we expect you to still work here. And I mean, what's Tavares going to say? No, I hated this and I didn't want to do it. He's not going to do that either. He's going to spout the line of, I've always come here, wanted to win a Stanley Cup. I still want to do that. That's what he's going to say. And that's what he did say. And I just hope that it doesn't translate into him having a really, really bad year, because he doesn't have that anymore. I do hope that he's more of a professional than that, but I do worry about the example of the Winnipeg Jets. And if you haven't seen the Winnipeg Jets,
well, if he resigns with the Leafs, then you'll know that that's what he wanted to do. Because if he's that butthurt about it, he's not going to be re-signing with the Leafs. And the Jets, they deserved to get every A and C taken off of their uniforms, because they absolutely sucked when they did that. So they deserve that.
If you haven't seen the Winnipeg Jets scenario, then do look it up, because it's quite something to behold. That is the end of our episode for today. I would like to thank Cam Jenkins, Josh Watson. I'd also like to thank our technical producer, Mark Aflalo. Stay tuned for next week, because you just never know what happens when you enter the neutral zone. Until then, be safe, be well.
The Neutral Zone is brought to you by the Ontario Para Network. Connect with them at ON Para Network. Follow them online at onpara.ca. Now that's a winning combination.